children, strength, I guess health, parenting, I guess for both the kids and the parents.
Yeah.
And before we jump into the topic, I'm joined by Will Clark and Coach Amanda will be joining us in a second. Before we jump into the topic, let's just go over, I guess, all the various things going on in our lives. Will, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going good. I'm on this horrible mini cut. So life is pretty horrible. I am down 8 pounds. 6 pounds is water. 2 pounds is my will to live. But beyond that, we're okay. Training has not changed, so that's part of the reason. Pretty high training volume still. But overall, it's fine. I am considering a refeed potentially in the third week. Weight's coming off a little faster than I would hope. And so there may be some room to, I say refeed, but I'll do a maintenance day just to get a little bit of energy back so I can keep going another week. And so at the really super low calories, it's training intensity sort of suffers. And so I've changed my training, moving it away from more compound lifts to more isolation work, but just higher intensity in the sense of going more approaches to failure, but at higher repetitions. And so a little easier on the joints, a little easier in regards to you can kind of, I don't want to say coast through, but it's not like you don't need the intensity of preparedness to do all your exercises. You can definitely apply intensity in a sort of more methodical way across the workout. So basically just focusing on keeping the muscle that I've built over the past 20 weeks in my massing cycle, really chest, arms, back. So a lot of specialization there. Probably only 4 to 6 sets total of legs for the week. Probably somewhere between, I don't know, 12 and 20 for the other body parts, just depending on, on the week, right, and how it falls. It's an asynchronous split, so I don't always have the same workouts on the same days.
So it kind of keeps it a little interesting, not so routine and boring, I guess.
Say again. Sorry, you're kind of quiet still, Dave. Sorry.
Is that better?
Yeah.
So the asynchronous, you're able to sort of switch things up, and it's not the same routinely. Monday we do this over and over and over. That's nice.
Yeah, it's nice. I just do 2 days on, 1 day off, and that gives me that variety that I need. And that way I'm not feeling just, run down every Monday. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's, whatever again, it's triceps again, or it's whatever. That way you can get a little mental break from it, but it seems to be working well. Just for the audience, I never reduce volume, even on a mini cut. That's a very popular thing to do. It doesn't make a ton of sense, since volume, as we know, is really the sort of key to keeping muscle, growing muscle, et cetera. And so reducing volume by quite a bit on a mini cut is almost guaranteed that you're going to lose some lean tissue because of the low calories, and that's just silly. And so for as long as you can, you want to keep it up. But I never do a mini cut more than 4 weeks anyway. Crash diets they're not sustainable.
Right.
And that's exactly what a mini cut is. But the hope is that after the mini cut and a little bit of a maintenance phase during the summer, my hope is that my appetite will return again, and I can once again continue massing and doing all that good stuff.
Very cool. And how many? So you've got 4 more weeks left or how many more weeks until you get to the goal weight?
So I'm already 2 weeks in, and I'm at the goal weight.
Okay,
So that's why I'm going to refeed before my third week, so I can keep going another couple of weeks. But I'll probably be a couple pounds below goal weight, and then I will rehydrate, recarb, and the hope is that I'll be down about 6 total pounds after I'm rehydrated.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's good to hear. I'm going to let Amanda get all plugged in. She just joined us. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
So sorry I'm late. I was stuck on the phone.
Busy work.
My update for the week, man, I haven't even gotten a workout in yet this week. So I'll be starting on Wednesday, tomorrow. I think I had a fever yesterday and overnight. At least my Fitbit was telling me my skin temperature was like 3 degrees warmer overnight than normal. And today I'm cold. So I have a jacket on in Texas. So other than that, I feel fine. Just fatigued. So I haven't gotten anything done yet this week. Just trying to hydrate, keep my food up, and I'll jump back in and feel better tomorrow.
That's interesting. You think it's just due to just overall life stress, or just weird weather, temperature, all that sort of thing? Or
I
what?
think since we've moved, it just takes me a little while to acclimate to a new area.
Yeah.
There's new allergens, there's new pressure changes and things like that. So probably just fighting some of that acclimation a little bit.
Also, insane record pollen this year in so many places.
Oh, yeah.
So that kind of misery is special kind as well.
Oh yeah. Thankfully I'm not having a bunch of sinus stuff because, I almost would rather just be a little fatigued and tired from a slight fever than super congestion and all of that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Like we talked a little bit about this on a previous podcast, but I was telling Justin, like, when you're doing hormone management and things like that, I've got Hashimoto's, but I've got Hashimoto's that attacks every organ of my body. It's not just my thyroid, because my thyroid is essentially almost dead. And so I got, I was very sick, about a week and a half ago, and I ended up in the ER because I had an antibody attack on my kidneys. It was extremely painful, whatever. And so actually I'm in the midst of like talking to doctors and saying like, how do we stop this? And they're like, well, really the only way to stop that is to get it out. You've got to get it removed because it just, it can't be there to produce the antibodies. So pretty crazy situation this summer, and the summer cold season put me in the hospital. So that was fun.
Oh man, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, and I'll give a quick, update. Well, found out the gym I was going to compete at in October is not hosting the competition. I do SAG Monsters every year. Goal is to get to the world stage it's either London or they keep moving it. We got to make top 10. I'm currently at the age of 38, like 29th. But once I hit 40, I'll be like 5th. So
nice.
The goal is to do it this year and it'll apply forward. So you can't find a gym to do that in. So we have a plan to peak for a comp that we're not sure where it is. And so we're trying to find, I'm trying to find another location. So I'm training. I'm always motivated. Justin knows if it's on the darn spreadsheet, I will do it or die trying. And so, but it's in the back of my head. It's like, but there's no comp, you know what I mean? So it's one of those things where you've got the motivation, but you better figure it out soon, buddy. So
yeah,
I'm kicking myself, but it's frustrating because people are like, man, what are you training for? Because we all here probably train more intensely than most people in the regular gym. And so I'm like, well, I don't know yet. And they kind of look at you like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. Well, but they're not asking that if they're watching you do your laterals. Because I'm watching you do your laterals. I'm like, those look good. Those are. Listen, I told the joke in our Slack like a few weeks back. I said, listen, I want to let everybody know that after 15 years of solid training, I finally hit 30 pounds on my lateral raises for the dumbbells.
Oh yeah. That's not one you can generally ego lift with.
Oh, breathe. No,
it's true. We're still going at it. I'm kind of like I'm in sort of in your spot right now, Amanda, where we had we do a friend and family trivia night with Monday. They had to reschedule it Monday. Like, well, that's leg day, so I only got like half of a day in, and then tonight our gymnastics coach is changing locations, so our shoulder and press day is now being moved to tomorrow. So I'm all sorts of annoyed and discombobulated. So, anyways.
It feels like it throws everything off, right? When something in training is wrong.
I know. It's like, this should be today. And I know we're talking special needs, and this sort of leads into this is sort of a segue of, most people doesn't bother them so much, but then for you, the world's ending, and let's deal with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing too, just to say straight off the rip, right? Like I'm autistic and I've got ADHD, and it's a fun time. But from a sensory perspective, schedule is so critical. for folks with special needs. And that's going to be whether it's some kind of developmental issue, physically, mentally, or if it's some kind of thing, like if it's some kind of neurodivergence like autism or something on that spectrum. Keeping kids on a schedule, especially children with some kind of issue like that, some developmental issue, is going to be critical. It makes life more serene for them. It gives them a familiar space in which to express that part of their life. And so if they're going to get in the habit of health, and to be clear, of course, we at High Calling endorse anybody doing health and fitness work, even within their limitations. If a child is able to move, they should be moving in the ways that they are able, right? Because not only does it help their body, but actually there's a great deal of research that it staves off the more transitive, debilitating effects that happen over the course of a life. There are some diseases and disabilities that advance over the course of time. If we think about palsies and things like this, they don't typically get better. With time, they usually get worse as someone ages. Multiple sclerosis and things like that in children will usually get worse. Muscular dystrophies will get worse over time. But they can be heavily staved off just by regular diet and exercise protocols that make sense. But the children that are in that situation, as the parent, our job really is to make sure that they're not going to understand necessarily everything they're doing and why, and they may not feel like it, and they may get frustrated with it. It's really important to say, to set it up in a way that says, hey, this is part of just your daily life routine. This is a thing that's just part of all you do. And we're going to try to keep, of course, as best we can, the same times, the same places, familiar environments, et cetera. And so straight off the rip, I think us as adults, we deal with that, right? But the kids deal with it even more. And then, of course, with parents of special needs kids, it's even more critical that you set the schedule and follow it. Because if you appear to be sort of discombobulated, right, that's going to translate, right, to how the child perceives the situation. And if it feels disorganized and if it feels unfamiliar and frustrating, they may have a much harder time sticking with it, right? In fact, they may be resistant. And in some cases, they're a very common reaction to that is just to sort of lock up and not do things and not respond properly or at all, for that matter. They sort of do the what I call, going pseudo catatonic, where they just won't talk and they won't do anything, and you can't get them to respond because they're so uncomfortable. And so that's a thing to keep in mind, is that really is a sensory disruption. It can be physically painful for them in ways that make their nervous system react oddly. They may go, it feels like something's crawling all over my skin when I feel anxious or whatever. There really are sensory issues that can occur there. And then with children who have processing issues, they need routine to keep that processing at a minimum. They don't need to process a ton of stimulus at once because they get overloaded. It's a speed issue. And so even though they are able to process, it's not like they're incapable of thought altogether. It's just that it's so hard to process that all at once. And usually it will result in some kind of resistance to whatever we're doing, right? And so that's straight off the rip. That's a big consideration. And it sounds like a huge burden, right? However, of course, we would all say it's worth it, right? Take that burden on as a parent and go, hey, I'm going to set the schedule and we got to stick to it as best we possibly can. Of course, things happen. So nobody's saying like, hey, you're a bad parent if you miss a day or something goes wrong. It's nothing like that. But one thing we should do for the sake of our children and for the sake of ourselves and our own body, right, and mind, is to keep that schedule. And if it's only 2 days a week, do it. Don't go, I'm going to do 5 days a week. If you don't think you can make that schedule work, start small, 1 day a week, 2 days a week. Start with regular physical exercise that's within yours and the child's limitations, right? If a child is wheelchair bound, right, you can start with just taking them on a walk, pushing them in their wheelchair, getting them outside, getting them used to moving around, right? You can start really small, basic movements that they're capable of. And it's even more important. Now, somebody might hear that and go, well, What if they're paraplegic or if they're quadriplegic? It's even more important to get them exposure to the outside. Even if they cannot physically move their body effectively, it is so important for you to set a routine and say, hey, it's exercise time now. We're going to move your limbs and make sure you're getting all the exercise that you need, so that they don't just lose a ton of muscle through the course of their life. Sarcopenia is an incredibly risky thing it's an incredible risk for folks that have developmental diseases physically, because they do lack movement. And over time, it's really, really hard for them to do much to get the stimulus they need. And so it is really important, even if you have to start small, 1 day a week, start it. 1 day a week, 10, 20 minutes, and then ramp it up. But make that routine and make it a part of their everyday life, because they'll begin to understand it's normal to get up and do these things. It's normal to go on a walk. It's normal for mom and dad to move my legs and to move my arms for me in the case where I can't move it myself, and all those good things. So.
Yeah, a huge pillar of what we focus on at High Calling is good stewardship. And it's multifaceted in a situation like this. You're going to be having to be a good steward of your own body, making sure that you are caring for yourself. That gives you more longevity so that you can be there for your children. Having your routine is better for your own mental health. Like, these things are part of being a good steward just in your own body, but then beyond that, that responsibility to your family in setting the example. It is kind of like ripping off a Band-Aid to start a routine whenever you're not in a routine already. And that can cause a lot of mental breakdown or sensory issues in and of itself for you or for your child. But it's an important first step, and it's a good thing to do, to ask somebody else for help with accountability in doing that, because sometimes it's just not doable to just make a routine on your own and stick to it. Have somebody else, maybe a veteran parent who's gone on this same journey before you, give you advice or give you a call in the morning. Hey, how's this going? How can I help you? Have you gone outside today? Little things like that. And this is how a lot of children with special needs end up getting stuck in front of a tablet or a TV and can't get out of it. And it's very difficult once they're in that state to make them start moving or to even change your own routine as a parent. So having somebody to help you, having somebody to call you and encourage you and keep you accountable makes all the difference in the world in making those changes.
I think the other thing to consider is that there is a deeper effect on the mental pathologies of children that have developmental diseases if they are in front of a tablet or in front of a TV or in front of a computer all the time.
Yep.
And what it does is, and this is going to sound wild because of the words I'm going to use, but they're just clinical terms for this stuff. But it creates what's called psychopathic pathologies. It's these places where their reality becomes distorted because they are living basically in a distorted reality. They're in front of a television, they're in front of a game, they're in front of a computer. And so their processing capability is dependent, right, on interacting in that sort of world. And so it really does create a disconnection with reality that can make them resistant, right, to going outside or doing physical exercise or any kind of routine that doesn't fit within that sort of world that they've created for themselves in their mind. And so it's not to say like, oh my gosh, the disabled kids are psychopaths. That's not what I mean. In a clinical term only, it just means a disconnection with reality. It creates a neuropathological problem where they no longer see the real world as their real life. And that's because their real life is spent so in front of an object that tells them, or that gives them an imaginary world to live in. And so it really is an issue. Now that happens to healthy children, folks that don't have any issues whatsoever. It happens to children with no developmental issues. They develop psychopathic pathologies because of overexposure to media. And so that's a common thing anyway, but much more with children that have difficulties processing that and also building what is reality around them in their mind, right? And so I think that's such a good point, Amanda.
So would you sort of, and I'm going to jump in and throw it application time here, and we'll jump in and out. As far as a parent trying to I've heard of these apps like June and others where we're trying to reward them with, I guess, screen time is what I've the typical, but like, you want to get them to build healthy habits, um, and you want to sort of do that to where you don't necessarily rewarding them with screen time isn't necessarily a bad thing, but at the same time, like, what are some ways, like, so what I've tried to do with my daughter who's autistic, she's class 2, some days class 3. Well, it is what it is. um and my wife's like, you're class 1, and I'm like, okay, well, fair enough. But
Almost
yeah,
anybody in any sort of IT job is
I think you
likely
have
on
to
the spectrum.
yes. Yeah, I love my spreadsheets. But um we're trying to, with Lilith, we're trying to we put in like time constraints on the games and the videos and the time in front of the screens. Obviously nothing before lunch, that sort of thing. Room has to be cleaned, that, basic hygiene, we check those boxes first. We don't have a gym routine as of yet. She's 9, so I mean she gets a lot of out time exercise, and we have gymnastics. So we do that. But what sort of things would you recommend as far as ways to be creative as far as getting these kids off the screens even more? I mean, shoot, when we were all kids, a VHS, VCRs, you kind of, it was a little bit more difficult to get on the screens, and I somehow managed to get on the screens a lot. But what would you guys suggest as far as ways of being creative about this moving forward?
I think that rewards can be useful if the child is a little bit more reward based. Not everybody is like that, but it's also something that, especially as she gets older, or children who are rewards based get older, they need to learn that not every good behavior is rewarded, because sometimes you're just supposed to do what you're supposed to do because that's what you're supposed to do. And it's not always going to be rewarded. You're not always going to be recognized. Of course, us as parents, we want to appreciate every good thing our child does as much as possible, because we want them to be loved and encouraged and appreciated. But
Mm-hmm.
the world isn't always going to be like that. And there has to be some healthy ways of not rewarding sometimes. Like, or maybe the reward is not screen time, but just a really over the top compliment of some sort that can be really
Yeah.
helpful. Just those words of affirmation. Um, but you are creating a lot of routines, it sounds like, already, where, gymnastics, even if it's not the same time or place every day, they probably have likely the same structure. You have got warm up time, you've got stretching time, you're going to do some drills, you're going to do some skills, you're going to do some events. There's probably an order of events that they're going in that's fairly consistent. The cool down time
Mm-hmm.
afterward, or whatever games they play, are probably very consistent. So those are kind of like these micro routines that are within your full macro routine. So it's good that they have that set up whenever they're going to classes and things like that. Sometimes when it's like, let's just go outside for outdoor play, there's not really a structure. It's fun, it's good, they're
Mm-hmm.
outside, but there's not always a structure. And so having some kind of structure is very beneficial. Um, they know what time it is. If it's an hour class, I know I'm going to be done with this in an hour. Little things like that are beneficial, just to have these micro routines, I think.
Yeah, and I would say that, one of the things is gamifying, but through that structuring, right? And so, to Amanda's point, you don't just, you don't want to gamify by generally going, well, let's just go outside for general play, though that's fine at times. But with my daughters, when we wanted to get them started, we did this thing called the feats of strength, right? And basically it was just the 6 patterns of movement, and they didn't know that, but it was just the 6 patterns of movement, and we just had them do those movements. And every week it was on the same day at the same time. And sometimes they get rewarded. Sometimes the reward was, hey, we did a good job. Yes, that's awesome. But what it did was it allowed them to track what they were doing themselves and go, okay, I got 4 pull-ups last week. And this week I got 5 or 6. This is teaching them things, general ideas of progressive overload and how exercise should be approached and why it's important to track, and that it is important to track. And then also teaching them, like these are 6 basic ways the body moves, right? And so you should be strong in these and whatever. And then, that eventually can go into more days, and say, hey, I think, we're just going to start sort of doing this more often and stuff like that. The other thing is, Amanda made a good point, the words of affirmation, celebrating the things that they do well and also celebrating the things they like, right? And going, if you don't have a reward for them, the reward can be intra routine, right? One of my favorite things to do is to program the exercises that people hate the most at the beginning of their routine, because the latter part of the routine are their favorite exercises, and that feels like a reward. Mentally, it helps them. And with a kid, it's going to have the exact same effect, if not an enhanced effect, at that point in their development. And so them understanding that doing the hard stuff gets you the reward of doing the fun stuff, right? And the fun stuff is still the hard stuff. It's just the hard stuff you like, Same thing with diet. That one's going to be really tough. Nutrition's a tough deal. And so I would especially say celebrate the things they like. Like if they won't eat broccoli and they don't eat, asparagus and stuff like that, but they go, oh man, I love green beans. You go, yes, green beans, they're so good for you. Awesome. Celebrate that. Feed them green beans. There's nothing wrong with that, And so celebrate the stuff that falls into those categories that they do like, and then give it to them more often, expose them to it more often. I think that's probably a pretty good mental sort of snag that helps them kind of go equate that with like, hey, this is a good thing, right? I really like this, and everybody's super happy when I do it. And so I'm going to keep eating green beans. I'm going to keep eating the chicken tenderloins. I'm going to keep eating, potatoes and rice and things like this. But whatever it is that they'll eat and do, we should celebrate that, right? And so that's, those are just a couple of ways that we've handled it here. Because if you go, hey, we're going to start eating healthier, instantaneously, you're going to get resistance because they don't know what that means. And a lot of times you put something in front of them and they're like, I don't know what that is. And I don't like that. It's not gradual enough. It's really, really sudden. And so that's sort of what we're trying to avoid. So yeah, hopefully that helps. But it sounds like you're doing all the right stuff, Dave.
Nutrition, kept bringing that up. Oh man,
it's tough.
That is the biggest struggle, I think, of all this, more so than getting moving. If you think about it, a graham cracker or a chip or something like that is consistent. They're always the same. And so when you have a sensory issue, they are going to be gravitated towards because they're always the same. A blueberry is sometimes soft, sometimes firm, sometimes it's tart, sometimes it's sweet, sometimes it's really sour, and you don't know. And that's really confusing and upsetting if you want something that's consistent. That's actually part of the routine stuff. So I think sometimes getting nutrition on track mostly has to do with having meals at the same time every day before you change what's in those meals. Make that a routine, and then you can kind of switch things out, go a little bit at a time, always one thing at a time, not a huge new meal. If there's a sensory type of issue or a texture things, it's huge. Most children that I've come across on the spectrum don't like meat because of the chewiness and the inconsistency and the way it's cooked. I have not had that struggle at all with my youngest. He is the meat kid in this house, but my older one, he had a really hard time. He hated soup as well, like just couldn't handle chunks of food floating in a liquid. It just didn't set with him. So we would have to make adjustments there. Neither of them are diagnosed. Neither of my children are diagnosed on the spectrum or ADHD. But my older one is blind. So he has a harder time with what's even on his plate whenever it comes to nutrition because he can't see it. He already has to feel around. Like he hardly salts and peppers his food because sometimes it comes out too fast and he doesn't know. So there's little things like that. But routine for him was incredibly key because of, for him, circadian rhythm. The not being able to detect when the sun's going down or coming up because you can't see the light change quite so much was a huge challenge. We had to do a lot of making sure he gets outside during the day in the morning. That's something that's good for everybody across the board. And And then for him, we had to do periods of melatonin therapy where we have X amount of weeks. Usually we did it for 6 weeks of melatonin given at the same time every day, wake him up at the same time every morning, and then wean off the melatonin. Melatonin should not be used often in children because it can affect how they go through puberty. So it's something that should be done only in certain situations. Yes, it's one of the healthier of sleep inducing substances, but it's going to affect them negatively in other ways.
It is a hormone.
Yeah.
I mean, it is an active hormone, so it definitely has a powerful effect. The other thing is, and Amanda, that's so amazing. The other thing that I was reading a lecture recently, it was just a transcript from a lecture where they were talking about CPAP therapy for circadian rhythm in blind children, and also children that were blind, deaf, or blind mute. And so they would hook them up to the CPAP, and the CPAP gave them the physical signal that it's time to go to sleep. And so when they put the CPAP on, the kids were more reliably going to sleep, right? At those times when they would attach the CPAP. They go, hey, it's time to attach the CPAP. They put it on, and then 10 minutes later, they're out. And so that's a really promising therapy. And so there's lots of stuff like that we're seeing that, to your point, is based on routine, building routine. It's sensory routine. I feel this at this time, and that means X, right? To me, I'm able to develop a healthy pathology around that part of my life, and so that's awesome. That's awesome, Amanda.
Is there now? I have seen this with my nephew, where as his brain is changing, he's able to either he's masking a lot better, or he's just not having the same strange, asking me a million questions about Halo in 5 minutes. That sort of thing. It's not happening. So either he's masking, or he just he's evolved out of it. His brain's developed out of it. Do you think that with these routines, and I get the importance of them, they could also end up being sort of potentially a social crutch in a sense, as you're a young adult trying to hang out with friends, and are these things that potentially you could still use as a positive? I realize it depends is going to be the answer. But do you feel like as you're seeing your own children grow up and their brains are changing, that they're able to sort of do away with some of the routines a little bit, or is this sort of a thing that especially with the higher classes of children that are definitely more disabled, this is a thing that's for life? I get that, but for a lot of the children that might be one or two, these are things that it's a tool in their tool belt that, when they need to lean on it more because it's been a bad week, let's go back to this. But maybe you can just put it back in the tool belt, as you.
Yeah. I mean, the brain is very plastic, right, in this sense. And so as long as there's developmental capability, there's always the potential, right, for the ability to not leave behind a routine, but to integrate it so precisely into one's life and so deeply into one's life that routine becomes normalcy.
Yeah.
And so you do see that a lot. And I think that is probably, I don't know this for a fact, I assume the theory is that the effect of routine staving off some of the progressive disability over time, or even, I don't want to say curing, but reducing symptomatic response to some of the disabilities over time, I think it probably has to do with neuroplasticity, right? The brain is very plastic in that way and can develop new pathologies for almost anything as long as that developmental capability is there. Now, you do have some restrictions, right? Like if they have alcohol fetal syndrome, you're going to really struggle there. The brain is far less plastic. In that case, if they've got neuroatypical development because of genetic dysfunction in the formation of the brain, or there's genetic deformation of the brain stem or any of the critical nerves or blood systems to the brain, you're probably going to have a little bit of limitation, mostly like Frere limitation, things they can remember all in a row. Their Frere limit is going to be much lower. And for anybody listening, a Frere limit is just a fancy way of saying a bunch of stuff you can remember all at once. And so the number of things that they can simultaneously process and commit to long-term memory are going to be much harder, right? And so routine would be even more critical there. However, I think especially with kids that are on the spectrum, we see it all the time. Routine creates normalcy. I watched this show called Love on the Spectrum. I don't know if anybody's ever watched it.
Yep.
It's very cute. But what's amazing is the symptomatic responses to their disability seem to disappear over time as they routinely have more dates with a particular individual, and because they do it on the same day at the same time every time for the show. And so there is something to be said for them, sort of the routine becoming amalgamated as part of their normal life, right? And then from that point, it's not a crutch in the sense that they have to have a routine to function correctly. What it is they think it's normal to have a routine. And so they function better when there is that sort of serenity of routine in their life. So for what that's worth.
I think a lot of those who may listen to this podcast may already have gone through this mourning or grieving phase, and they're trying to look for solutions. But I do want to at least mention that when your child is diagnosed with something like being on the autism spectrum, having ADHD, or any kind of disability or neurodivergence, there is a period of just like mourning and grieving a little bit as a parent. And that's something that has to be done. And that may be not the time to start creating a routine, but it is a good time to, of course, seek the Lord for comfort, seek other parents who have gone through this, and really just build up the strength of your family before you really try to look at all these little details and all these little tools that you have to do. I think that's just a really important step at the very beginning. And if you're kind of along this journey, if you're one of those type A personalities where you got the diagnosis and you just hit the ground running with, routines and all this stuff, you probably need to stop and do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we got the diagnosis during Sunday school. I'm like, oh, I got a cool email. I got this email. Wonder what this says. And I swear I did not hear a single word for the rest of that service. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you kind of know, but it's not the same until you get the letter. And I've accepted it, but it's taken me a lot longer than I wish it would have. But it took me a while and even now, I don't like talking about it. Like, I'm just being honest. I do not like. So how's Lilith doing? I'm like, all right, you better watch what you're about to ask, because I'm about to get defensive real quick.
Yeah.
And it's partly because I'm projecting, because my kid, you know what I mean? And, yeah, I get it. She's difficult. It's frustrating for everyone, and we're working through it. That being said, I'm trying to figure this out. Yeah. And but and they mean well. They always mean well, except for maybe close family members that don't understand. You better watch it, buddy. This fence is about to go up real high. But it's just one of those things where, to your point, Amanda, like it does. You need to take time and figure it out. What does this mean? You can't just get busy hiding from this reality. And I honestly, that was probably my first response was, let me get real busy by hiding from whatever this is, and be in denial. And I was probably in denial for a while, if I'm being honest. But it's a good word for sure.
I mean, I think that's so important. And the compassion there also comes in for your ability to communicate with your child. Once you grieve and you've gone through that, you're more compassionate for your child. One of the things that I think we really have to focus on, especially and I have been with and cared with folks with alcohol fetal syndrome and various palsies. And for myself, right, it's sort of the same thing. People will ask questions like that are insensitive, not meaning necessarily to be. It's so important that we communicate to the kids in this case and say, this is the way that God made you. There's nothing wrong with you, right? Like if you were to take a child to the doctor that has alcohol fetal syndrome, someone might go, well, what's wrong with them? Well, I don't know, because if they scan them, they're going to go, they're healthy. right? And the reason they're saying that is because they're formed the way they're formed. They have the disability that they have. However, there's nothing to fix. That's just them. That's how they are. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with the child in that sense. And so from a compassion perspective, it's critical for us to get to that point, right, with ourselves and go through that grief and go through that realization and go, okay, look, what's most important is helping them live life the best way that they can and helping them understand that this is not a thing that is wrong or incorrect about them. It is just a thing that's unique about the way that they are formed, period. That's it. There's nothing to fix. I get that question all the time from parents with kids with various disabilities. And they go, well, what would you recommend? What should we say to the doctor? How do we sort of go about fixing this and fixing that? I'm like, there's really not much to fix. They're healthy individuals. They just have a disability or they have a developmental issue that happened along the way. There's nothing more to be done about that. What's really to be done is giving them an environment where they can grow and thrive even with that disability. And I will say this to the side of the parents, please hear me when I say this, but one of the most critical things, and hear the compassion here, you got to take care of yourself. That's like going to be one of the first big steps. If you're not taking care of your own body and mind during those times, and especially your spiritual health, at that time, your child's going to see that. It's going to translate to them. And even though they may not be able to communicate as effectively as you would like, I assure you that the processing that happens in the brain is still quite advanced, even with people who have disabilities. And they do read things like that. They understand when they feel like a burden, when someone may see them as a problem or something like that. They see that, they read that, and they understand it. And they may process it a little differently, or they may process it in a very simplistic way without a lot of nuance that we might normally have. But they can still understand that. They can still process that. They see if they are draining your life, if that's what it appears to be doing, they see that. But if you're happy and hearty and hale and doing all the things that you need to be doing to take care of yourself as well, including proper diet and exercise, they'll see that as well. And that will imprint on them in a positive way. And so we do have that effect as well. It's critical that the kids understand that they are a blessing to you, that it is a blessing to take on that responsibility, that it is a gift to have them as a child and to be able to steward them in all the special and unique ways that they need to be stewarded. I love this post from a gentleman the other day. His daughter is paraplegic, and it's because of muscular dystrophy. And so it's just so bad that she's just paraplegic in the legs. And he said, I spent 6 months in the bottle, right, about this. And one night I was so inebriated that she needed help getting upstairs and I couldn't carry her. And so she had to sleep on the couch and she rolled off during the night. And it was this whole big thing. And he goes, I got up the next day and he goes, for 10 years, I've lifted weights. I take care of myself, whatever. Why? Because my daughter's going to need me to carry her up the stairs for the rest of her life. Yeah. Right. And it's a gift. It's a blessing to be able to do so. That kind of thing is really, really critical. Take care of yourself so that you can take care of them. And in taking care of them, you also help them understand that they have value and that their body and health is worth taking care of as well. So that's a little philosophical. So sorry for the tearjerker there,
That's
but
right.
it is so important. It's so important.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, they really do pick up on the way that we talk about ourselves and treat ourselves, and will do that themselves. I mean, how many young women who speak poorly about the shape of their bodies have mothers that did the same thing? So like these things get passed down, special needs or not, and they're going to be watching you and picking up on things like that. So yeah, the way that you treat yourself definitely matters. And they noticed inconsistencies, because if you get to have a bowl of ice cream and you told them they can't, well, they'll know. Yeah. They will point it out and they will know, especially if that's the consistent food they want and not.
Yeah.
I do that.
Yeah.
I do that with my wife
Mhm.
now when I'm on this mini cut. I'm like, wait a second, you got ice cream. Why did
Hey.
So no, I go, hey, where's my
Not
ice
allowed.
cream? No, I know.
Oh
I
man,
know,
my
it's
that's
great.
totally different subject, but my husband hates it when I'm in prep because he's a strong man and I'm a bikini competitor,
Oh,
and I'm the one that cooks, and
oh,
sometimes I forget to add more fats for him, and then he's like, "No,
yeah.
now what do I do?" I'm like, "I don't know, eat like 4 avocados, something."
Yeah, yeah. How am I supposed to? How am I supposed to do my strongman on this chicken breast and asparagus? What are we
Right.
doing here? That's right. That's right. But I think the other thing is for adults, training with kids with special needs, there are a few little considerations maybe to keep in mind as well. Things like providing them with lifting
Mhm.
belts that can help them brace when they don't understand how to do physical
Yeah.
bracing properly. They'll push against it naturally. That's just how the belt
Right.
works. And so just from a sensory perspective, that'll help them. If they need something like gloves, that's great. I really recommend wraps if they can avoid the gloves, just because the gloves get so gross and nasty over time. But something like a wrap, even something as expensive as, say, a VersaGrip that can help them just sort of get rid of that weird sensory feel of the knurling on the bar.
Yeah.
That can help quite a bit. Helping them understand muscle soreness and the
Mhm.
difference between muscle soreness and joint and muscle pain. And teaching them the positives of things like soreness and stimulus, things like pump and burn, and explaining to them in simplistic ways those things where when they begin to feel physically uncomfortable, you go, no, this is a good thing. It tells us this, and we want it to feel this way. Does it feel that way? Yes, great. We're doing all the right stuff. Excellent work, right?
Yeah.
And then understanding what motor patterns work best for them. And I would say really, really hammering those motor patterns into pretty much every time you do exercise, right? If that's the thing that works the best for them, it's great for them to work other patterns as well. But they're going to have a much easier time if they associate something that they're good at with the routine of exercise that they're doing. So just from that perspective, a processing and a sensory perspective there as well. And then of course, loose, comfortable clothing. It's fun and cool when we see folks with disabilities compete in powerlifting meets and all this kind of stuff. That is so awesome. But some kids may not be comfortable wearing tight, like a singlet or something like that. They need loose, sort of flowy clothing. So t-shirts, joggers, simple shoes, flat bottom shoes, if they can wear them, right? Things like Converse. Don't put them in lifting shoes. That's going to physically make it hard for them to move properly in some of those spaces. And so just some small considerations like that. If they have trouble with certain motor patterns, this one's one of my favorites. We're talking about lateral raises. And so if they have weakness at the end of the lever because of an issue with their muscular development or their joint development, getting things like a cuff to put around the upper arm instead of the wrist, right? Like putting it around the upper arm here can help them lift more effectively if they're doing something like a lateral raise to keep their shoulder healthy and strong. There's all kinds of different things like that. I love a very light cambered bar for bench press because it's going to feel physiologically more natural than touching the bar to their chest. But it still gives them the space to bench press and move through that pressing movement properly. I don't love anything overhead if they don't have to.
Yeah.
And the reason there is because sometimes folks with developmental disabilities, both mentally and physically, there's a nervous system reaction that can happen there in the midst of a high stimulus situation where potentially something gets dropped or falls. And so I don't love overhead work. But that's really specific to the child. Now, if they've got something like a Down syndrome, they're probably capable of doing overhead work, no issues there. But with things like dystrophies and palsies and things like this, we may want to watch and say, maybe we do most of below the neck work, things like below the neck presses. If they can do a deadlift, that's great, right? If they can do any form of even a partial squat, that's amazing. Anything that keeps the hip moving and healthy, that's great. With kids that are paralyzed, really, really important to consult with a professional, somebody who has has formal training in applied physiology of some kind. A physical therapist, if they're a good one, we have a podcast on that if you want to know what a good physical therapist looks like. Anybody who is an A&P sort of specialist, right? And especially somebody that works with pediatric disabilities, really important to get exercises that work, that because you'll have to help them, right? You'll have to help them move, but really important to understand what movement is productive and how much it takes to be productive, to keep sarcopenia and osteopenia from happening in the bodies that are paralyzed. So just a few little considerations there.
Mm-hmm.
I think the gloves one or the wraps one is a big deal. I still get weird. It feels like I feels like I'm chewing iron in my mouth whenever I grip the knurling of a bar. And so that one, stuff like that, you never know what it's going to be. So I just can't stress enough. Like if they ever go like, this feels weird or whatever, you can find a way to remove that sort of tactile weirdness. Right. By using different implements. And that's where strongman implements come in really great. Things like hex bars, things like cambered bars, things like buffalo bars and all that kind of stuff can really help, right? Doing things like if they don't like carrying stuff like kettlebells or anything feels weird on the joints or in their hands, or it gives them pain in a certain part of their body, things like sandbags or things they can hug and hold in front of them are really, really good options. Fillable bags that you can fill with different kind of media until they go, I like the way this bag feels, whether it's sand or wood pellets or rocks or whatever it is that they like the feeling of. Those are great options. And so, and then of course, if they need mobility help, it's we have great stuff that we have access to all the time, slant boards and things like this that you can use to help them do little movements in a greater range of motion is really great as well. But again, it's going to be so individual. It's really important to communicate with them about what they're feeling while they're doing it. And if anything is becoming hard for them because it feels odd or strange, or they don't understand kind of, how to make it work for their body.
We've been talking a lot about things that are more on the line of autism or sensory types of things, which is incredibly important. And a lot of where parents need the most help. One thing to add to that is let them choose the music that's on in the gym.
Yes.
That would just make them feel more comfortable. But also things like walking with a weighted vest. There's a lot of those with sensory issues where just having weight or squeezing on them, they like it. They feel good and they'll keep doing it and they'll want to do it. So like weighted vests are obviously appropriate for their size and their age. And you can increase that as they get stronger and as they want to do more. Those are great. I wanted to spend a little time talking about ADHD as well. There's not always a lot of sensory stuff that goes with ADHD. There can be some, but what can happen is a difficulty in following multi-step instructions, getting distracted when you're in the middle of something and hurting yourself because you're not paying attention to your surroundings. And then on the opposite end of that, there can be a hyper fixation on working out whenever they begin, and that's all they want to do. So there has to be some way to pull back from that. So going back to even routine, having actual clear instructions for them to follow. What I did for my son, who's younger, is actually not diagnosed with ADHD because he's not been old enough to be tested yet. I highly suspect he is. He was born addicted to heroin and some other drugs. And so that's just very common for them to develop ADHD and potentially learning disabilities. And he cannot follow an instruction that is longer than 2 steps. He just can't do it. So I printed pictures of little kids that have like little cartoon children doing the workout, like doing a squat, and it's like a 2-step squat. You're standing in one picture, he's squatting in another picture. And that's all you get to see. That's all you have to do. Same with deadlifts. There's like a starting position and an ending position. And that's it. If it's more than 2, it's just not going to work. I mean, eventually he'll be able to have that, but he will get distracted and not paying attention to his surroundings and trip over things. He gets to go to the gym with us and he'll be so excited because he can pick something up and want to run and show us and trip over something because now he's carrying something and running and not paying attention, which of course can happen to any child. It just seems more common and more often in those with ADHD. And it's just something to teach them the tools with how to overcome. so that they know this is a part of myself. I don't always focus, and sometimes I focus way too much. And I need to know how to be able to snap out of it. I need to know when when it's very important to pay attention, and especially when it has to do with physical things, moving your body in situations where you can become injured. But most children with ADHD and adults with ADHD actually do better the more they're moving. So letting themselves kind of get tired out and exhausted, that's a good thing, as long as it's not so tired they're overtired and now they can't fall asleep, because that can certainly happen as well.
It's definitely a balance. And I would say for ADHD, one thing to note is that it's not autism, right? And so one thing, don't automatically assume for parents, if you've got kids that feel like they fall in that line, having a child that's ADHD doesn't necessarily mean that they'll have the sensory issues of autism. A lot of time, autistic children do have ADHD problems, but that has more to do with the inability to process the information properly because of the neurodivergence. It has less to do with sort of classical ADHD. And so autism HD is sort of what they have coined the term, right? And so that's different than just classical ADHD, and obviously, should be approached a little differently. And so I think that's a good call out, Amanda, that kids with ADHD, they will have that hyperfixation or no fixation. And so they need, sort of simplified versions of the routines and simplified versions of the instructions to be comfortable doing that and retaining that information as well. So I think that's amazing. I saw the little pictures that you made, and they were great, of the little kids working out. That was so cute. It was so amazing. What a great idea.
It was all AI, ChatGPT.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah, I just made a little cartoon boy that looks just like my son and doing the movements. So
Yeah.
He loved it. He wants more.
That's so
We did have a question come in for us on the podcast today, asking best workout splits or something that's the best option for when you have an infant. And I think that's a good one to include here. Even if an infant is not special needs, it's a special time, and it's a very difficult time to find things to do when you're exhausted and you don't know when you're going to have to drop everything and take care of a baby who's woken up from a nap or whatever it may be. So I would say with that, firstly, make sure you're cleared from your doctor if we're talking postpartum to do anything. But for both parents, this is something difficult to do because you're both on the clock all the time. And what I would say is if you're not doing anything, begin with just 2 days a week and make every movement compound. That's going to give you the best bang for your buck. Then, isolation movements, do squats, do some deadlifts, do some benches, do some presses. If you just stick with those 4 even, you're better off than not doing anything at all. So if you're only doing a little bit, I wouldn't even say there's a specific split to stay with. Just do full body, a couple days a week, and increase it from there. If you have a little bit more time, you can increase it to 3, do something like a push-pull leg split, and still try to keep things as compound as you can. So just for parents that can go for not just infant parents, but any parent who's trying to start out and build a routine for themselves as they're trying to begin caring for themselves so that they can care for their families better. That's just one of the best boilerplate places to start.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good gym equipment that you can get at home relatively inexpensively, and most gyms, I think wisely, will not let you bring a newborn into the gym nursery.
Mm-hmm.
So it's if you are cleared, you can get a lot of really great stuff on Amazon or Walmart that'll get you really far for fairly cheap. Until you can either go back to the gym or decide you're a psychopath and you love working out at home. One of those two. I can't do it. I've got it, but I got to have friends with me. And most people, I cannot do the whole solo in the garage thing. It's not me. But when we had babies around, we would just throw them in the, put the little, little thing on that you could hear them breathing when they were asleep or whatever. And just train in the garage for the hour that we had, or 2 hours we had with them asleep. Or later they would just be, in the little baby dungeon in the corner there in the garage and be, watching us train. And so that works out great. But yeah, you can find a lot of that stuff. Again, either Facebook Marketplace or Amazon.
Oh yeah, I've actually programmed using water bottles for someone who wanted to work out at home and didn't have any equipment. Gallon water bottles. A gallon of water weighs 8 pounds. You can get larger sizes. You can put other things that are heavier in it. Like there's a lot you can do with that. Or if your baby is awake, you can use your baby as a weight safely, responsibly. We all know the limit. But you can do that and they love it. The kids just love it. So yeah, there's all kinds of ways to program without having any equipment and still be able to move and make yourself healthier, make yourself stronger. And then you'll just, find ways to adapt and progress over time and what kind of movements work for you, what doesn't. And yeah.
Yeah, I think for advanced athletes, it's probably a good time to specialize at that time as well. It's going to take a lot of the burden off of you. If you can only make it to the gym a couple times a week, or really even put in the time if you've got adjustable dumbbells at home or something like that. I would say for an advanced athlete versus the beginner, you might say, well, I'm going to focus the days that I have to seriously work on fitness on the parts of my body or the exercises that I need practice in the most, and then take everything else down to minimum effective volume. And here's the funny thing about minimum effective volume. When you've already built the muscle, it doesn't take hardly anything to maintain it as long as you're still eating healthy. And so here's a great example. If you're working on your bench press and you want to dedicate the 2 days that you're in the gym to bench press and a little bit of upper body accessory, that's fine. It's a real short routine, maybe 20, 30 minutes, shouldn't take you long. Get in, get out, get the work done. And then when you're working your legs through the week, literal body weight squats with intensifiers like very slow eccentrics, pauses at the bottom, high ranges of motion and things like that for several sets will keep your muscle in your legs. You will not lose anything. Now, you're also not going to build muscle like that, right? Because there's not enough stimulus to create that kind of response. However, there's zero muscular deficit that happens with regards to things like body weight work if you're already possessing the muscle. The blood and the oxygen debt that those muscles create, even just moving through space, is pretty incredible. If you've got a 30-inch leg, you're not going to have a 28-inch leg by the end of it. You're still going to have a 30-inch leg. You just don't have to work it as much. And then you can spend the focus time in the gym on the things that you want to work on. And so for advanced athletes, that's really the only change I would make, is you may want to go to more intense body weight exercises to just keep minimum effective volume up for the body parts that don't need the work, or the exercises that don't need the work, and save the time in the gym for the things that you're more seriously working on and trying to develop at that time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. This has been a fun conversation. I appreciate you guys joining us for, again, episode 212. If you guys reach out, if you have more questions, reach out to coaches Amanda, Bill, or Justin at highcallingfitness.com. They can do all their coaching and dieting and programming there. Please reach them there. Words hard. Barbells Barbells is the Facebook group. If you want to run into some of our beams, ask questions, form checks, whatever, we are there on Facebook. Until next time, gains and grace.
Gains and grace.